And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Z, Shaolin Abbott, previous bounty hunter and former military contractor who also had a TV show called UFO-AZ. He is currently in contact with ETs that are named the Plejarens, which we're going to learn about, and more. Z, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Well, Z, how did the contact with the Plejarens start for you?
Well, it's kind of funny. I train soldiers to become warriors, basically military contractors, and down in the glades. And I had this habit of just taking a walk sometimes out in the swamp, and nobody else wants to go because they think it's dangerous and all that, you know. And to me, it's just like it's pure nature, and I just really enjoy it. And so one time I'm walking down, and I don't know why, but I chose this other path, game trail that I was walking down just to see something new, you know. And then all of a sudden I see that like we're 100 miles from anything, and I see this lady caught up in the mangrove trees. And if you don't know what a mangrove tree, it's kind of like or trees. It's like the roots are above ground, a lot of them, and so it's easy to get tangled in. And then also the swamp out there, we call it the suck because you step in it, you go up to your knees, right? So it's very difficult, and you can't cross over the mangrove trees very well because your feet are slippery and such. But so anyway, I see this beautiful blonde lady in a blue jumpsuit sort of thing, and she was tangled up in the mangrove and in the roots and stuff. And so it's like, this isn't making any sense, you know, the input is wrong or firing wrong or whatever. And so I just kind of take a breath and I look around and I'm wondering if I ate something or, you know, if I was smelling something that was allowing me to have an hallucination or something. But, you know, I'm the kind of person that, well, it's just kind of go with it. If it's presented to me, I must need to see whatever it is, right? And so I was a little bit cautious and I kind of moved forward, and I could see that like she kind of flinched because she was seeing me too. And so I figured I'll just treat it like I would an animal, you know, that got hung up out there or something. And so I moved a little bit closer, you know, I lit a cigar and stuff like that. And, you know, I'd look at her and then I would look away and stuff like that. So anyways, I just eventually got pretty close, and you could tell she was a little nervous, but it was okay, right? And so I could see how she was tangled up, and I needed to cut a couple of limbs out of the way and vines. And so I took my knife out and I showed it to her from the distance, you know, and then I just real cautiously set it near her so that she could look at it and backed away. And I kind of, you know, used hand movements to describe what it does. And so, you know, she picked it up and then moved it back towards me like it was okay. So I moved in and I managed to get her out. And once I got her out, I could tell that she wasn't walking right. So then I made kind of motions of how I could pick her up and take her where she needed to go. And it was kind of weird because the whole time it's in my head, like, is this real? Right? What's happening? And so anyways, she allowed for that. And so I picked her up, and she was incredibly light. She kind of looked like she would have been about less than 100 pounds if she was wet, right? And so anyways, she kind of guided me to a place where there's a old Indian mound out there. And so she kind of motioned for me to put her down. And so I set her down, and then she kind of motioned for me to back up, and I backed up, and she put her hands together like in a prayer, and boom, she was gone. This blue light come down and she disappeared. And I thought to myself, well, that was fun, you know, and went on our way. And then about a couple of weeks later, I'm back down there again, and I'm trying to, you know, I'm thinking, I'm walking, and it comes to me that maybe I should go check that spot out. You know, I hadn't been back there. And so I do go back to that location. And when I do, this blue light comes down and covers me. And the next thing you know, like a blink of an eye, I'm on the ship. And there's like 6 characters in front of me, 3 men and 3 women. And I'm looking at them, and they're kind of like not looking real pleasant about me being there. And so I'm thinking in my head, well, you know, if they eat me or something, then I'll have a great story to tell in heaven, right? And then I get down to the end where Semjase was the one that I helped, and she's just like waving and stuff. And I was like, okay, it's going to be okay. And that's where it all began.
When you first picked her up or when you first saw her, was she in distress or in pain? and making any noises like she was hurting physically?
It was like if you would imagine somebody that was like climbing through those trees and got stuck in them, and then was having a hard time getting out. And then, she saw me, and I don't think she was in panic mode, but she was alerted. And so, by being cautious, it seemed to be okay with her, and we connected.
It's amazing your abilities on how to interact with her, I guess, like an animal. And what I mean by that is how you would look at her and then look away and then present the knife to her to make her feel safe.
Yeah, like recently, I always wanted to capture a gator, and so I got about a 6 footer, small one, but I was, able to work on it, and then I've had this experience where the black panther was walking up on me, and how it just I thought it was going to eat me, and it jumps over me, right? And the interaction, it just I don't know, I just don't react like other people do
Hmm.
to certain things because I don't have fear of death.
Maybe they can sense that about you.
I don't know, maybe.
Well, let's get back to the story. You're on the ship, you see these six Plejarens, and you see her. And I think you said her name was what?
Semjase.
Semjase. So you see them all.
Yeah.
What happens next?
It starts off real slow and it eventually moves to, like, they were a lab ship, and this is all unintended, right? And during that time, it's like their command. I kind of use things, I call it homerization, like Homer Simpson,
Mhm.
but to dumb it down so that I can make sense of what I'm talking about. And that's been a very good tool
Mhm.
as things have progressed, right? But their command asked them to, work with me but none of them had any training in contact. And so most of them weren't real happy about it. And we started working a process. And it got to the point where there was this incident, which came back to me just recently, from the very beginning, that I didn't quite understand. And that is that I would say, tell them something, and then they would respond to it and ask questions. And we got to this point where it was a really simple thing. I was like a man walking down the street without a shirt. For 16 hours, they grilled me with questions about that. And they were just as excited at 16 hours as they were in the very beginning. And it was like, this is just too much for me, and I had to back away from that. And so what I did was I ended up, I told them that I just needed a little rest from this, and I went home. And then it was about 3 days later, and Sam just shows up right in my hallway and comes in, asks where I've been and blah, 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 right? And so I'm watching this TV show. And so I said, come here, watch this. And we watch a sitcom. And so I had to stop it about 3 or 4 times to answer her questions about it. And then I started watching a second time, a third time, about the fourth time, she asked me why I keep showing the same show over again. And I explained, this is what it was like for me 16 hours in your ship,
Oh,
talking about that one thing. And so we had a kind of a breakthrough where I could show them shows and movies and things. And in order, then they could ask me questions from that. And that seemed to work.
how are you guys communicating? I mean, do they speak English or did they implant you with some kind of
No,
communication chip?
it's a very long, detailed story, but I'll shorten it as best I can. When I first met them, when me and Sam Jess was talking or communicating, right? Well, I was using mostly hand signals and showing my body as being, not threatening and stuff. And she, responded in kind. And then when I went on the ship, I was kind of surprised because they were speaking kind of broken English. And the long story short was this, synetics or something like that's called, where it's like you take a steel plate and you put sand on it and throw tones in it, and it creates these shapes. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I forget, there's other words for it, but essentially when you shoot a certain tone or vibration frequency into the sand that's vibrating on this steel panel, it creates shapes.
Hmm.
And these shapes you'll see a lot represented in other places like the Om and such, like in the temples of these Chinese temples and Japanese temples. You'll see symbols, and those symbols actually represent sound. And so what I've learned from them over, since 2022 is that when all languages have a certain cadence or meaning and tone, and it's very simple for them to learn it and understand it because all language is the same essentially. It comes first from the heart, and then so it comes from an emotional state, and then it's presented, and that's like just like boom, that quick that it starts, and then they're able to use voice in order to understand the language. So they can pick up almost any language. Of all the species that I've met, all of them had the ability and adapted to speaking my language because I'm allergic to language. But and like for instance, Roswell, they use it. It's an or what do you call it? Like a galactic language. These symbols. Animals can speak them and they're understood with the higher intelligent animals, and the lower ones, they can be understood and they can communicate to them too. Roswell, the ship had this strip of symbols on the side of it. And if you if you make those sounds, you're saying the name of their species because it's like a signature to their species, which a lot of them will do this. So as far as language goes, it's very easy for them. For me, I'm struggling with it, but I've been able to pick up on and understand what some of them are saying.
These Plejarens look humanoid, just as human as we do, or are there some physical differences?
The Plejarens are almost identical to us. You would not know unless like their eyes are bigger. And that's the only real telltale sign that they're not us, other than that absolutely perfect. And the majority of them are tall, like 6'8", 7 foot. Where Semjase, she comes to about my nose. She's the runt of some of them. So it's not absolute in their people, but it's pretty common. Other species are all different sizes, and and they'll have like little differences in their skin. Now the Plejarens, that some of their waste goes through their skin, through their pores, but I've never been able to feel anything or smell anything like that because their intestines are shorter. Their hair, it's almost like monofilament line. It's very fine and silky. It's different than ours. It's not coarse or anything. It's very light. They have the ability to change that too. Being Plejarens, some people think of them as the Palladian type people and stuff, where they're all blonde and blue eyed. Well, for the most part, the Plejarens are blue eyed because of the environments that they're in. But I forget what they call it. Anyway, and their hair can be changed just by thought, where they can change the color of their hair. But I kind of use like the lab ship where these people, it's a long story, but essentially they were like a group that works for the government, right? They don't have a government, but if you would put that in mind, and they'd be like military, but they don't have a military. But anyways, like there's a standard for your clothing and for your look, right? So, anyways, that's where the blonde hair comes in, and so essentially, and I've seen them um, without clothes, that sort of thing, and you can't tell the difference. So yeah, there's virtually no difference.
You have the word Plejaren and then you have Pleiadian. And I think some people would think that they're the same.
No, and I think the Plejaran system is really hostile to the type of life that we would, that we see. I think what happened is like there's been stories because there's been visitations, right? And I think there's been stories for a long time. And to recognize where, the Plejarens are, you have to go past the Pleiades. But the Pleiades is what we can see in our sky. So I imagine people kind of pick that up. I don't know for sure, but maybe because it's around 483 light years, I think, to the Pleiades, and then 80 light years past that is where the Plejaran planet is. And so, anyways, that's my assumption, is what we've labeled to contact with people who live that way, So anyway,
What did the inside of the ship look like?
Most of it's rather smooth. I describe it in my homerization as RV. Like the living room is like the front of the ship, and they do have a kitchen, but they don't necessarily make food like we would think of. And then they have their own rooms and lab area. And on the original ship, since then, as we've moved to a lot larger ship, and other things have taken place to cause that. But when a lot of people ask about the shapes of their ships, and I find it interesting because in all this time, I've only seen like four saucer shaped ones. Basically, what they do is they create the ship in space, because when you take metals and you touch them together, they weld, they fuse together in space without any equipment or anything. And so they have the ability to manipulate any shape that they want. And so it's individual in a sense in order to create the ship for certain purposes. But for the most part, they're all extremely smooth. You don't see doors or windows or anything like that unless they want to, right? Open and see. Um, they have a glass that's inherent in a lot, what I call glass. It's like a window or whatever, and it's like there's nothing there, and it's like diamond hard. Uh, so yeah, essentially, you have different ships for different purposes, and you can be of any shape. So there's nothing that's consistent about one race and another.
Are there a whole fleet of them out there in space?
Earth isn't really of interest, to them because we're still like cavemen in a sense, and we haven't found our abilities yet, to be. So we're not popular in that sense. But there's millions of ships that's in space, and
Mhm.
I mean, they're everywhere.
What do you
So,
mean by not having found our abilities? What abilities are you speaking
well,
of?
there's a lot to understanding of what life is and the natural law. Basically, our space is a huge realm of multiple species who go by what's called natural law. In other words, like when I got to witness them terraform a planet, and the whole premise behind it was that they could not change the planet in any manner that would deviate from what it could be. So in other words, it has to stay consistent. And like there's a race, there's a lot of aliens that are like I call the bug people. They're scary to look at and stuff like that. And they do kind of have a hive mind, and they don't really have a lot of emotion, but they still get along with the humanoid type people, but they don't really interact much because there's nothing there to interact with. But they obey what's called natural law. So, in other words, if they go to harvest a planet, right, for minerals and things like that, they cannot, of course, damage the planet or change anything about the planet other than taking the material. So, what they do is they take all that they can, but they don't need all of it, so they share. And so, it goes back and forth in that way. Natural laws, there's, anything that would deviate from what is would be against it. Like when they're raised, when they're very young, they're given like these toys, and these toys are educational in a sense, but the kids will naturally gravitate to specific ones that they like. And so they'll keep feeding them more and more with these types of toys until they get older, and they advance from that, because the universe always has a plan in a sense, and that goes into a deep detail about the quantum. But essentially it's a natural path. They have chosen, not necessarily by themselves, but through more than just themselves, through consciousness itself, or the streams of consciousness, to go a certain direction that they enjoy. And it's not work to them, it's more like what we would do is call play, and they just enjoy it. They do it all the time, except for at certain times they'll have to take a short, like 20-minute time to rest, which is a whole nother thing because there's so many different layers of consciousness that how they think. Like the 16 hours, I started to figure out recently what that meant. That 16 hours where were so excited about asking the same type of questions over and over again. It's because when they speak to us, when they interact with other beings and stuff, they work on multiple levels of consciousness. that are all taking place at the same time. Recently, I got to actually experience it in one of their rest times, and it was like I'm going into almost like a meditation, right? And then suddenly I'm in this void, and then I start to hear myself talking to other people, like five of me talking, having full blown conversations with other people and other things that are going on at the same time. And I'm consciously aware of all of that, but I'm confused. Is this body, why I'm having a conversation over here, I'm having a conversation over here, and I'm fully conscious of each of those conversations at one time. That's because the way they see things, do things, it's all based on more than just one, uh, we call it layer of consciousness, which leads to so many other things about the planes of existence and the dimensions contained within each of those planes of existence or lives. What we call past lives are all current lives, and each of those lives is going on simultaneously because there's no such thing as time. And the thing is that we see ourselves in like, oh, we have this past life and this past life. They all seem to be on the human level or the earth type level. When in reality, there's multiple planes of existence, not just this plane of existence. And we have lives on each one of those planes of existence. And a dimension is an aspect of oneself, or in other words, on that plane of existence, there are multiple dimensions. So we may be ethereal, we may be physical, we may be, anything that you can pretty much think of having these current lives going on at the same time. That's because there's no death. And that's because we're not really here, we're a projection. When the basis of my homerization in order to start to figure out just the tip of this iceberg was that, consciousness is a big puzzle board in space, right? And on that puzzle board is this big lazy boy and this guy with the gray hair and stuff, and there's got a whole bunch of televisions in front of him. And he's watching, like you or me, individual. Each one of those televisions is projecting one of our lives, right? And when we perceive and see how each of those are different is because when we chose to take a piece of consciousness and be projected, we put a part of our essence on there. And so that essence is being projected down to like what we feel like we're here in this earth, right? And when we perceive our death or the end of that TV series is over, right? Well, that consciousness returns to the whole, the big puzzle board, and the essence that was on there goes to like a library, what I call a library, and that is a life that can be accessed at any time. A little example of that, there was this ghost show, right? And this kid who was like a great grandkid or something of Lizzie Borden. And so he was in the Lizzie Borden house and he starts to have this full blown conversation with her. Now, he believes that his conversation with her was that from her from the past and him from now, but there's no time. So he was actually currently talking to her because we never die. That is still in existence. And so all of our lives and everything are contained within that museum. Anyways, that's how it makes sense to me. It makes it easier to understand.
In this dimension or on this planet, humans are like caveman or cavemen, right? That's at least how we are compared to the Plejarens.
Oh yeah.
But you're saying that we're also existing in different realms and in different dimensions at the same time. In these other places that we're simultaneously existing, are we more advanced and we're not cavemen there?
Well, it depends on what is advanced as an ethereal being, right? It's so hard for me to conceive of even outside of this plane of existence, because just on this plane of existence, I could be having 7 or 8 dimensional lives that are taking place all simultaneously. We perceive them as time, different times, but they're not. It's all going on simultaneously. Everything we do is in a moment. Our entire lifespan is just a blink of an eye.
Did you learn all this from them?
Yeah,
It's
I had
pretty.
no clue of what the quantum is. And, what I found out later too is that me and Semjase are a quantum entanglement. And, I
What
didn't
do you mean by
understand.
that?
We are the same thing, complete opposite, right? And so, in other words, like Einstein talked about not being able to send a communication through quantum, which is instantaneous, right? So, because the other side wouldn't be able to receive. But in reality, it's just that I would be upside down and she'd be right side up. but in the sense of two planes of existence merging, bringing us together, we are basically the same person, two different projections of the same person, and what we would perceive as different times, but actually it's the same time. There she's like, was it like 200 and some years old in what would be or like Earth years, but she appears to be like 24. And and then here I am 65, and but we found out we were born on the exact same day, same hour, if you applied where she was born to where Earth is, right? And so doing the mathematics of that, we're identical in a sense, in that sense.
Are you saying that she is you in another realm or in another dimension, and for some spontaneous thing that happened, you guys actually are in contact with each other?
Yeah. And see, that's where our connection, emanated from. And we didn't even know that at the time, but that was what we pieced together through time. Where, yeah, that I use the word time. It's very difficult to be able to speak English and be accurate, right? Just like time. There's no such thing as time, but it's how we perceive things. So yeah, it makes it difficult to understand a lot of this stuff without the language. But yeah, there's two different dimensions on this same plane of existence, because she was on a plane of existence with multiple dimensions. I'm on a plane of existence with multiple dimensions. Those two planes crossed and our two dimensions met each other. So that guy sitting up there on consciousness watching all the TV shows, well, I'm on this one and she's on this one. Now we got a shared show. When I first met them and was interacting with them, and the thing is that I had to completely change who I was. And people that know me know what I've been through, right? Both the soft and the hard sort of thing. And and for me, it was very difficult. But when I go on the ship, I term it as like shutting off the light, right? Because when I walk onto that ship, I have to be completely naked. Naked in the sense of I have to be exposed. I cannot hide anything. I cannot lie to them. I have to be absolutely genuine and pure. If they ask me something about myself, I have to tell them the truth about myself. And knowing that how they felt, like they were kind of afraid of us. They're not a contact group, and all they can think of is when they know about Earth people is that they're very violent, right? And deceitful and all that stuff. So, and in order to stay with them, I knew that I had to find a way to be completely open. And you can't do that here, because here on everybody we meet, we have to have a different face for. That's the only way that we can possibly communicate. Where with them, the only way is to be completely open. One of the things that happens is when you walk on the ship, you're scanned, right? And it looks at your body and stuff like that. It removes all the bugs that we have on our body, the thousands of bugs, and it replaces them, right, with sterile ones. And so in order so that we, be, contaminant free while on the ship. So anyway, that, and as far as being able to communicate, they saw scars on me and these bullet holes. And so they questioned me, and it's like, oh my God, if I tell them where this comes from, right, that they're going to know that we are barbarians and violent and stuff like that. And I don't want to lose my connection with these people, because there's so much love that's the key and the magic of everything is love. And I didn't want to disappoint them, but I knew that I can't hide it either. It's deception. So the only thing I could think of, since I had introduced the TV show and stuff like that, being able to communicate better, I had to pick something that would probably talk about that. And I picked the movie Taken. I don't know if you know what that was, but it's not that I'm that person or anything, but it's about a guy whose kid is taken, and he does all this stuff in order to get back to her, right,
Right.
and save her.
That's a
And
Liam
so,
Neeson movie.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So, in other words, put ourselves in harm's way, for those we love and such. And so, anyways, Semjase, want to show it to Semjase first before I show it the others, just sort of gauge the reaction. And so she takes me into her room, and we get into her bed, and there's a screen above us, and we're watching this. And then I come to realize I can hear noise going on out in the rest of the ship. Everybody else is watching it at the same time we are. And I'm thinking, oh God, it's over for me. And anyways, by the end of the movie, she's got put her face right up in the screen and watching it when he gets his daughter back, saves his daughter. And when he does that, she gets up and leaves and the room, and I sat there and think, well, I'm going to get one of these Plejarens coffees because it's the best coffee ever, and this is probably my last one. And when I go back out there, they're going to probably X me out there, or else they're going to, cut me up and use me for food or something. And so when it got to the point where I had to go out there, so I get up and I go out into what I call the living room at the front of the ship. And when we get in there, they're all standing around and they're all in tears and stuff. And they kind of surround me. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I've done speeches about my charity and stuff in several churches where they invite other pastors and ministers or whatever, and they do the laying of hands on me. And, it's always been a powerful thing when they did this to me. But now here I am with all these aliens, and they had just seen this, and they seen I've exposed myself, and so they've put their hands on me, and immediately I just fall to the ground, and they can't believe how much that we as Earth people, what we go through, and how we get scars and stuff on our bodies and everything, and they appreciated me even more, and that created a really strong bond between us because I shared that with them. So in other words, when I'm on the ship, I have to be what I call naked. And it's very difficult to do because when I come back on the way out, I have to flip the switch off so that I don't try to be that here.
Now, you've had NDE or near death like experiences. Did they show you what happens to humans when they die and where they go?
Well, a little bit like I was describing, how we go to the museum, then that essence is placed back into what's called the museum, but because there's an endless supply of essence to put on, the puzzle pieces to be projected, right? But in the simplest terms, like that is that me and Sam just did this thing that I labeled travel, and it's not like it's like like what most people would think of as astral travel or something, but it's not astral travel. We actually we would connect, and I think we amplify since we're the same being, on this one plane of existence. We're able to pass beyond the body, and we enter what's the quantum, and the funny thing about the quantum is that it's it's like everything. A lot of people would call the quantum God because, like, if you want to find the quantum fluid, you have to recognize it first. So once you recognize it, all of a sudden it lights up, right? And it's a stream or a stream of consciousness that you can, put yourself in a sense. And we'll see all these different type of sacred geometry shapes and symbolism of them, or like a double torus. At one point, there was a double torus. A double torus is like a lot of people don't understand the terminology. Either did I at the when I first started. But like an urchamata, sea urchin. Okay, you have the sea urchin, and it's got kind of a dome, and at the bottom is like the hole, right, where other things come out. A double torus would be like taking two of those and putting where the bottom holes are together, right? And so each side has like a spiral. And when you enter it, like one time when we were doing this travel, we don't really have control in a sense. We do and we don't, but we entered into this double torus where you become, as you spin down through it long, people will kill me for the explanation, but I'm not a quantum physicist or anything. But essentially, you're going down a spiral, right, which is making you into a singularity. And at that center point of the double torus, you are reorganized in a sense. And me and Semjase, when we went there and we was experiencing this, we realized that once we reach that singularity and we're just like insignificantly small, that we'd be put together, right, by the quantum, and become something different on the outside, or what we've created on this side, we would become that on the other side. But some reason we didn't. We stayed the same as who we were coming out the other side, which is a whole nother story. But anyways, we were relieved at that. But it's also it has a lot to do with the fabric of space, which connects to almost anything. Like a lot of people believe in dark matter. Dark matter doesn't exist. It's because the mathematics in space is different than what it is here on Earth. And so you'll have one place that has certain mathematics, other places others. when they start to layer up, it becomes dark, right? And it's because we can't see through that, or we presume it to be dark matter. And the reality is dark matter is a catch-all for people doing scientific studies, and they don't have an answer to it, but they've got to get paid somehow. So they throw, oh, it's partly dark matter, and uh, and that leads to how they discovered that, we didn't have a Big Bang. And how we were created is how all solar systems and galaxies and universes are created. And it's a rip in the fabric, which becomes heated. And then you have like foam oozing out of it. And in that process, it's collecting other celestial objects and stuff in order to become what it is to be. And a lot of them turn into small celestial objects or float outwardly. So we didn't have quite a Big Bang. We just had a spread out of this cosmic, material, and it caught gravity and started to spin.
This method of travel that you shared with us, is this the same method of travel that their ship uses? And if not, how can their ship travel such great distances so quickly?
This is what's really cool to me. It was one of the earlier things that I learned, other than like the power and the colonies and stuff and how they work. But um, where did I go? I just disappeared. There's so much going on in my head right now. How they move. What they do is like every one of us are unique in frequency. Everything in the universe has a unique signature or frequency, right? There's no two that are the same. And so, like, if they're here in our atmosphere, let's say, and they want to go to the Pleiades, like 500 and some light years away, it's instantaneous. They don't need to there's wormholes don't work in that way and things like that. What they do is, let's say they have a computer that's something far different, but this is our language that we can understand. And they pick a place in space that they want to be. And what they do is they identify every frequency in that space. And it also can predict up to like 3 seconds in advance of what may happen there, which can predict something other stuff. So in other words, it's going to be safe when they go there. And otherwise it takes them to a different location near there. But they just become that frequency. So, like when they pick me up, they could be 500 light years away, but I walk into my hallway and one step in, and then the next step I'm in the ship. And it's because of this identifying frequency. And they're just changing it from one place to another.
Did they ever reveal to you any message to humanity for you to share?
The contact that's being done there's little things, and there's also like with the government and sort of things, but it's not what people would imagine. And there isn't really any sharing, but we think we're getting shared with. But um, essentially, it's the consciousness and how they work the contact with us is like children, mostly children, because they're not corrupted yet in the programming, right? Because we all program a certain way, and we believe that's the only way. That's the brain, the survival mode. And so they speak to these kids, show them their abilities. Because one of the things that they told me was like the things that we believe is magic, like walking through walls, levitation and stuff. We all have those capabilities. And I use the one phrase that about Jesus when he was healing all these people. And at the end, he said, you, the people of this earth, can do all that I can do and more. And they really liked that because it was representative. We have the ability to do so much more, what we would imagine is magic. But the key is that we have to get out of the brain and enter into the mind. Where if a brain, like say you have an experience, say it's a really scary experience, right? And you believe what is happening to you, and you're so scared that it goes away. But in order for you to remember that, your brain has to come up with references in order to fill in the gaps of it so that you can have a complete memory. But it's an impure memory. But you don't know that. Whereas in the mind has pure intention, pure references to send to the brain, right? To be interpreted. So it becomes a real memory. And so that's the thing is about brain is an organ, and it creates the function of the bodies, right? And so on and so forth, but it's very limited because it can't go much beyond that. Where if you move into the mind, you don't have to find explanations. You experience everything to its fullest and you don't question things. Like if you go into the pyramids, right? And you want to figure out how this happened and how this worked. that's just going to corrupt because it's an unknown and it's going to come from the brain. Where if you're in mind and you enter it and you experience just everything that's in front of you to the fullest extent, those things will come back to you. You don't have to ask the question. They just seem to appear. Maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe a year from now, but somewhere out of the blue, you'll get the answer to something that adds to the experience. And that's a pure reference, which can be sent to the brain to create that memory or that knowledge.
Did they ever reveal to you the history of humanity? And what I mean by that is, did we evolve from primates, or were we tinkered with by some other species and created to what we are today?
Awesome question, because it's not like the evolutionary thing that that we're taught or was taught, however that works. Essentially, the way they help me homerize it. And basically, there's a big tree on Earth, right? And it has lots of leaves. And eventually, one of those leaves is going to drop, right? And when it hits the ground, it becomes a species, and it starts to evolve on its own. And then some of them work out, some of them don't. Some of them exist with other species, right? So for instance, like as us as humans, kind of what we are now was evolving. And say they went to one of these mysterious places. It could be anything like the pyramids, or like I love the example of the one over in I think it's near Bolivia. It's Lake Titicaca, where it looks like Lego blocks and they're magnetic and
Puma
stuff like that.
Puma Punku, is that what it is?
Yeah, something like that. But those beings with the elongated heads, there were like I think 4 different species of that, and different places across our in different continents. And some of them could fly; they'd have wings, and some of them didn't. Well, they coexisted at the same time as us in our most elementary times, and taught us many of the things like pouring the blocks to the pyramids and what finding the ingredients to that place near Lake Titicaca, and finding where the magnetite or whatever it was that was added to the blocks when they created the mixtures and how they formed them, put them together. So in other words, we can coexist with other species that have existed here on Earth before they go extinct. And like us right now, we could continue to survive or we may go extinct. It'll be up to us. But through their contact, where they teach the little kids not to be teachers, but they show them the magic, right? How to create the magic. The magic is to create memories of love, because our brain completely functions, but it has plenty of room for memories, right? And the more types of unconditional love memories that you have fill different locations in your brain. And that's what it makes you have the ability to do far much more than what we think we're capable of, like levitating, walking through walls, or other things that are far greater than that, right? But that's as an example.
To recap what you were saying, there was another species alongside of us thousands of years ago or so that had the elongated heads that were probably technologically superior to us and helped created all these ancient structures. But for some reason, they went extinct.
Yeah,
Did they tell you how?
no, no, there's only so much that I can keep in my head at any one given time. And it's like the layers, right? Having all these conversations while I'm in this rest period and all the experiences that I had during that. Let me go on that just real short. Was this first experience, they had invited me into their 20-minute rest period, and I thought, great, because I'm exhausted, and so I sat there with them, and we go into the just breathing comfortably and getting relaxed. And next thing I know is, I'm in darkness, but I hear Semjase, who's sitting next to me. She goes, "So what do you think?" And I go, "Crap, it doesn't work." And she kind of laughed at me. She goes, "Do you see me?" And I go, "No." And she goes, "Do you feel me?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I was in their mode, right? Into the layers, but I wasn't recognizing all the layers that I had capability of. And then suddenly I started hearing all these voices, right? And it was me. And I'm having conversation with other friends of mine currently as it's going on, and all at the same time. And then it kind of slowed down a little bit for me. And I saw my cat that I had for 27 years, and it came towards me, and then I felt it walk through my heart. And then right after that, I see my grandmother, who I was very little when she passed away, but she was from Lithuania, and I remember her out in the farm, going picking peas out of the shells and stuff like that. And all the things that she contributed to my life, right? And I sat and watched several of these little things like episodes, right? Next thing I find myself in a place I was very familiar with that was out in northern Phoenix. And um, it was a beautiful place. It had this blue type Precambrian rock and this little stream that went through and tiny waterfalls and caves and stuff. And I was just totally at peace there, right? And I look up in the sky and I see a hawk. Next thing I know, instantaneously, I'm seeing through the hawk's eyes and feeling the breeze on the wings and everything. And then boom, that goes away, and I'm right back on that rock, and I can feel the sun, the heat of the rock, and I'm laying there and just really at ease with all of this. And then I hear Semjase again going, get up, are you done yet? And so I come to, and I'm thinking, I go, how long was I gone? Because I felt like I just had almost an entire lifetime. And she said 20 minutes. And I didn't go to sleep for 4 days. I was so rested. When they teach these kids that they've contacted, they teach them the magic, right? Where their abilities will come from and stuff. And they're not to ever be teachers, but they can be living examples. And there was a YouTube channel, I forget, or a video that I think has been removed since then, but it's about this little Chinese girl who's walking into this like garden area where all these flowers are dead. As she passes them, they come back to life. And that was a real thing because that was part of her abilities. The idea is to change our consciousness in this world, or help assist it by it's like the 100th monkey sort of thing, right? You see somebody and you see the actions and you want to emulate it because it's positive. You're always drawn to what's positive. That's why they cannot be teachers, but they can be examples, right? So anyways, that I wanted to put that in there.
Did they ever reveal to you when or if humanity will be invited into the galactic family?
When our consciousness reaches a point, right, that's acceptable. And I don't see that as anytime soon. We're so far away, just like me having to become naked, right? That's just one of the steps, and having the abilities to see things and think on multiple layers at the same time, have a better understanding of who we are and what we are to abide by and what's natural law. So in other words, conflict when at work, monetary stuff it doesn't need to be exist because it's all a divide. It's all part of the program. We have to be conscious. And I asked the captain one time, what would it take for us to reach that point of consciousness, right? And he goes, well, give everybody everything that they need, and suddenly money will have no value. And then people start working towards togetherness and consciousness. I said, yeah, good luck with that.
As far as I understand, you're still in contact with them.
Yeah.
Back in last December, when all the stuff was going on with the New Jersey drones, did they have any comment to you about what was going on?
No, it's sort of something that I do and that I've been really good at all my life in the kind of works that I did. But it was very simple. What it was that a new you can find documents on this and figure it out. But there was a transport of a dirty nuke or whatever, or in other words, it wasn't a bomb or nothing, but it was the ingredients to that showed up at its destination with a broken crate and it missing. And so what was happening was, you can find this out too, about there's a environmental police. I can't remember the name of it actually, but there were 70 vehicles that were scouring the area. At night, it's easier to see with drones. And so multiple drones were being sent, and it was done, through the Pentagon to find this missing material. And how people are, right? They just generally want to join in, right? And so now you have, rather than 100 drones, you have hundreds of drones that are flying around. Now, also there was a lot of arrests made because people flying, against what the license allowed them to do, flying at night or whatever, or so forth. But you didn't see a lot of that in the news either. And so that's what that was all about. It had nothing really to do with aliens or anything like that. But the Plejarens just kind of thought it was kind of comical. It's like how we react. It's similar to them, their people. When there's a distraction, it's like everybody's in on it, because they work, and they enjoy their work. But the instant somebody creates a distraction, it's awesome. Everybody wants to be part of that.
How often are you in contact with them?
It varies. It's like the way I describe it is like having a really great neighbor. That's a lot of fun. And so every once in a while you get together for like the barbecue or whatever, or the next day they come over or something. So it could be like 4 days in a row. I'll be with them, or a day, or even 2 hours. And it just depends on the flow and what's going on.
Do they usually show up unannounced?
Recently, yeah. But in the beginning, this is sensing that they do, that they taught me, that you could feel. It's like static. I could feel static. And then the first thing I would think of would be one of them, and then they would show up, so that was the beginning. Now it's more of, I already know. It's just I'm connected to them in a way. That's why we call ourselves a family, but we're very connected. Sensing is a good thing too, and it's good for anybody that, like, one time when she was teaching me this, I drove out to Fort Myers Beach, and this kind of secluded area where I could drive right up on the beach, and we're sitting on the hood, and we're just looking at the stars. It's one of our hobbies, right? And so I said, like, I wish I could talk to that one because I could see the movement, and I knew that identify it wasn't, it was a UFO or whatever you want to call it. And she goes, well, that's easy. And she goes, do your sensing. Basically, what sensing is that you feel like a orange ball, warm ball that enters into your skull and out your feet. And it just keeps repeating, right? Again and again and again and again. And as that's going, when you get comfortable with that, you think of something that of a memory of yours that was of unconditional love. And you repeat that in your head while you still got this ball going, right? And while you're repeating that memory over and over and over again, then it becomes real. When that moment happens that it becomes real, you're connected to whatever you seek, right? And so that's when I said hello, to the thing I saw in the sky, and I heard hello back, and it was like right then it kind of shocked me. It's like, oh my God, this is cool, you know. But that's sensing, and that's how I used to be able to feel them when they would come and go, that sort of thing. But now it's just show up.
What other species have you been in contact with besides them and the bugs?
It's really cool. I mean, I've met so many that are very similar to us. Some of them have lived here at times for a period of time and to understand us. And there's a whole story behind those things. But one of the most interesting ones was the very first species that I met, which I call the tall grays, right? They're not really gray, they're more green and stuff, but they resemble that same look, right? And they're supposedly like the architects of our universe. They're old, very, very old. And um, I was introduced to them first by seeing them deep under the water, where they have a home and things like that, or where they exist. And then there was another time I got the opportunity to meet them on the ship. And that leads to another really interesting thing is, like, they don't have quite the same atmosphere or gravity or those sort of things. And so, like, Sam just showed me how they can create the environment within the ship in order to accommodate multiple types of species in their environments. By When you look at the screen she showed me, it almost looked like there was a bubble around them. But when you're looking with your eyes, you don't see anything different other than they're right there with you. But within that bubble, they can is creates their own atmosphere through the atmosphere that's existing. And so they can act normally and breathe normally and that sort of thing within that. And so they came, and it was kind of awkward because they looked quite unlike us, right? They're tall and they're like the grays, right? And so to speak, with the big eyes and things like that. And they don't really, they have emotion, but it's very hard to find. And so it was very difficult for me to communicate with them, but I understood them, right? And finally, there was this big, um, where everybody come together, different species that I attended with them for a reason. And one of the ships had one of my, uh, she kind of looks like Avatar. I call her Navi, but she had more of our colored skin and everything. But you could see kind of the differences with the eyebrow and stuff like that in their shape. And one of that species abilities, their specialties, is communication. And so on their ship, which I went and visited during this big get together, um, uh, that's was one of the things that they were showing, promoting their species, right? And so was able to sit across from, I could pick any of the species I wanted, and then I chose Plejaran to be because they didn't have an Earth person, and because the Plejarens are so much like us, that I wanted to be able to see what it was like to actually have a conversation with this being, and so I chose the tall gray as the one that I would get to communicate with. Now these are just non-existent, right? It's just created for your training in a sense, and so it was a pre-program to have a certain conversation, something about moving something from one ship to another. It was just, mundane, but it was to give you the opportunity to understand and feel what they were feeling and how they would communicate back to you. And that's what allowed me to understand them on a far greater level, is because they do have emotion, they do have humor, but it's in a way that you're not familiar with, right? And so when you have this communication with them, you're imparting words, but you're also experiencing something completely different outside of that. When we talk to somebody, the emotion that comes from us comes from within inside us, and it's a parallel. Where when you speak to them, it's outside of that being, where the communication is direct, but the emotion and other things are outside of that. And see, I wouldn't have been able to figure that out without, having a long time with them. But with this machine that was able to understand it. Then the next time I met the grays, the tall grays, was I actually was able to, you know, participate in the communication because I understood them.
Have you been in contact with any other species of aliens here on the planet?
Uh, well, I've been with one or two of them here on this planet because they had used to live here before. And so we made an event where we brought the female, I call them Vulcans, not because they're anything like Vulcans, except for they just represented a lot to me, the way their face was structured and stuff. But she came along with us, and because I wanted to see how she reacted to what Earth was like now versus when she was here in the 60s.
Hmm.
And it was interesting. So I I haven't met, for the most part, any other aliens here, but I know there's hundreds of aliens that exist here on Earth.
What do you think about people who are involved in these CE5 events where they get together and they meditate and try to call in UFOs? Do you know much about those, and what is your opinion on them?
I only know one group in particular, and I've known them for many years, like 20 years, 30 years. I don't know how long, but it's been a long time. And it's interesting. And when we did this, like they were taking pictures of the area, right? And it was kind of funny. And they're all getting together, and I know who these people are, so I know their intention and stuff. And when they sent me those pictures before they even started, right? I started blowing them up and looking at them, and like in one of them, there's 18 UFOs in it, and I think it was 18 or whatever, and all of them seemed to have pictures of UFOs, but I had to zoom in order to see them, and then and that blew them away. They didn't know it at the time until their event was over, but then they started looking at the pictures they took on the way there, and there was UFOs in those too. And it was an agreement, right, for me to bring the Plejarens or help them in that contact. And since then, she's had some other events, or they've had some other events where people came up to her and said it's changed their life, and they were sobbing. They never felt so much love. And I wrote down, the kind of stuff that we did, and this, and was separate from I didn't know what happened to them, right? And we kind of compared notes, and they were completely parallel. I mean, it's just the same. So, and then there's also a lot of pictures. Somebody set up in Japan a full spectrum camera, and that nobody else knew about. And there's multiple pictures from that event. So, yeah, these people I know, but I mean, it's like everything, right? Some people already have a perception of what it is that they're going to see or how they're going to interface with these beings. And then there's other people that are open and just create that doorway to invite what they don't know. And so I can't define all of them into one group.
If we want to make contact ourselves with the Plejarens or any other species, are we able to do that?
Yeah, but you have to, it's kind of funny. There's so many layers to everything, right? And like when I met Semjase, I felt for a long time. When I write my books, they're diaries, right? So I write them in order. And I also, as I learn something new or something different, then I add that into it. I never stick to one thing and not change. But as I learn and grow and into what I understand about them, I write about that. And like one thing is that you're going to like the way I try to present in a general sense, right, without going into it for an hour, is that when you prepare something like that, you don't say the intent. The intent has to be already there, right? Over the years, you've accumulated the desire to meet an alien or whatever it may be. And so if you sit down and go, okay, now I'm going to meet an alien, so I need to create the intent. Well, you're going to miss all the things that you left, or you're going to leave out all the things that you had collected over the years that you don't have in the moment. So don't worry about having an intent. If you truly have that desire, that's in your heart. And so when you sit down to have that communication, don't expect that it to be physical, because that's what I realized. I thought for a long time that my connection with them, the first one, was physical, but it wasn't. We all create our things in a stream of consciousness prior to this. So we already put together what's going to play out in this part of our life, right? This conscious self. So to do it, you have to be able to willing to give into anything, to be naked, and and allow the communication to come to you. And then the next thing is that what happens is when somebody actually steps through that doorway, they may see many things. Like most generally, they're going to see a lot of things, and they're not going to know what those things are, but they'll go in and they'll start to explore all these different thousands of things. Well, that's kind of like, a kid going into the candy store, telling them to buy one thing. That's what they need to do, is just buy one thing. So if they see a being near them, then they should look at that being, give all their energy and all their focus and all their experience into that one being, and allow an eternity for that to happen. What happens is you'll get what you need, and you'll have a full experience to bring back with you, right? Where if you just scattered and went about, you may not believe what it was that you saw. You may throw doubts into the experience that you had. You'll be dismantling it within yourself. So to have a pure experience, and you sit down and you want to connect within the mind or whatever, or even physical, you just create that moment to happen. And it has to be full of love. There can't be any fear. You have to open your heart. You have to accept whatever comes. What does come, you need to believe it. You need to have faith in it and trust in yourself in order that to happen. And when that happens, then you're more empowered for the next time. And each thing is just like a small movement. So yeah, that's the way I would see or try to tell about, or the sensing, like I explained about the sensing.
In what ways do you feel that you've evolved or changed due to your contact with them?
That's my friends. um, I don't know what you call it. I said, from the very beginning, they called me their equal. And I didn't understand what that meant. And it's because that we all have these capabilities to do anything, right? But we can't put labels on any of that. And we just have to go with it in a sense. As my writing is completely changed from the time I started to this last book that I'm writing, right? And you can see the evolution in the way I perceive things. Like in the first part, I was trying to, being how love is the most important thing in this, and the energy that emanates from oneself when you love, right? And you open that ability to love, it cracks it open further and further and further, because that's the one thing we protect here, right? And in that way, in the way with reaching them, you have to open that up and be vulnerable, allow that to happen. As you do, like for me, I start to become aware of things I didn't understand before. I used to try to define love. What unconditional love is. Oh, well, that's, I identify that as unconditional love, and so on and so forth. But what I'm experiencing, because I allow that not to be defined, it keeps expanding. You cannot, love could never be defined. But love is the pure consciousness. It allows you to enter the stream of consciousness, which allows you to move through any layer that you wish. or multiple layers at the same time. So that's the key. And that's how I have changed, is because it changes the way I see everything. It was like because of some of the stuff that I do, I know we can't really speak much about the things that I do, but some of it's extremely horrific and it does affect the body. And I've trained over the years in order to become callous to all that. And there was a time that I was doing one of my works, from here commanding, and Semjase was next to me. She felt so much pain coming from my body, but to me, it was the way I deal with these sort of things in order to accomplish what I sought out to do, right? And so I kind of hide it in a way, and it allows me to navigate through it and see it to the end. Where she was very concerned because by doing that, I'm damaging my body. And so she told one of the other people, the family in the ship, I call her Snake Lady, because she kind of moves like this, and kind of smells you and stuff. And anyway, she is kind of like a spiritual, very spiritual in healing and stuff. And she's taught me many things about how life is created and how it's formed and when it begins and all that. And anyway, she took me through this process of healing where she's like just like ripping everything out of me. And I was going through all this pain, and so much so that I thought I was going insane. And then she would repair me and then take it out again and then repair me until there wasn't enough left of the bad stuff. Right. And then she helped me evolve from the brain to the mind, because the way we see things and the brain doesn't know how to react when it goes to a certain point. It's like PTSD and stuff. And so you have to replace those memories with more powerful memories of love. And that's basically what she put me through. So now when I do a rescue and I'm faced with something that's absolutely horrific, I'm able to act like I was before, but not allow it to affect me. It's like going from sandpaper to smooth steel. It just slides through me. I process it, I accept it, I internalize it, and I let it go. Rather than letting it cling on and build within me.
You've written about 12 books, right?
Mhm.
And all the proceeds from these books, I believe, goes to your charity in assisting children,
Yeah,
correct?
the quest, ECSS.org.
I think that's an amazing thing that you're doing. And after this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and contact you. Is that something that you do?
Mhm. Yeah, they can email me. On the back of the book has all my contact information. My books are all on Amazon, Plejarens Diaries, and
Mm-hmm.
you can look at the cover and the back and everything like that. And it has that on there. Or else, you can go through, like, I'm on Plejarens Diaries at Proton Mail. So I'm easy to find that way. Uh, and my website, the Quest, ECSS.org, even has my address and phone number on it. So, I'm easy to find.
What's in store for humanity? Like, do you have any clue of what's coming for humanity in the near future? Anything new and exciting, or pretty much the same?
Well, the evolution is love, right? And experiencing and creating memories of unconditional love, because what that does is it opens up what we perceive as magic today. And that's part of the evolution too, is that the abilities that we have are limitless, to what we are capable of doing. We don't recognize it because we're stuck in the program, we're stuck in the brain, rather than being mindful and brainless. And then also not dismissing anything that you don't understand, because there's going to be a whole bunch that you don't understand. We live and exist on so many layers, right, that we don't even perceive of now. And like when Sam Jess was telling me, that we are existence of multiple planes of existence on, in so many different realms, right? Ethereal, light body, and so on and so forth. Pretty much anything you can imagine. And each of those multiple planes of existence, in each of those is multiple dimensions. A dimension being an aspect of oneself is a life. So each plane of existence has multiple lives, and it gets overwhelming, right? And so it's easier just to be able to hone in on what's in front of me, right? But then you will experience things that you don't understand. Like I've experienced as being a light body, I've experienced as being ethereal, and several other things in our travels when we allow ourselves to freely flow. and to accept things we don't understand, and not just to miss anything, but just to be part of the experience. So just like that one thing I was talking about, the sensing where you feel the golden ball just moving through you, the warm ball over and over again until it becomes repetitious, and that you can keep that going while you think of a memory of unconditional love that you had, and then keep replaying that while both of these are going on. When that memory becomes real again, suddenly this big doorway opens, and then that's up to you. That's where we need to seek to be going, in the direction that we're going. Because if we do that, everything else takes care of itself.
Do you have any other tips or practical things that we can do to help us along in our evolution?
Well, that's, love, right? And creating unconditional love. And, when people think of that, I've had people tell me, well, I can't think of anything that meant unconditional love to me. It says, have you ever had a pet? Oh, yeah, And so we all have that connection, right? And we just need to help perpetuate that happening to us again, because we are creating, we are just a projection. We create our future. We create the life that we're living right now, and if your life kind of sucks right now, then, well, you got to ask yourself, why are you creating this, in a sense? Because that's what we do. We create through our mind what is our experiences. So you want to meet aliens and stuff like that. But, when that doorway opens, when you go into that like sensing that I was talking about, when that doorway opens, it may not be what you truly want. It's like I used to describe about prayers, right? People see a prayer answered, they see a miracle, when in the reality, every prayer is answered. It's just that we don't necessarily always, we keep talking, when we're in the prayers, we get blah, 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 and we drift away from what it is that we truly want. And we don't really know what we truly want when we start to make it like that. So just keep it simple, the KISS method, right? Simple, let it go, and you'll receive it, right? And then so that's why we're creating it.
Do you think there's a way to truly discover what we want?
Well, yeah, of course. That's what I'm finding. That's what these people have taught me. I mean, I've been through the Shaolin, the monasteries, the treaty, all the different trainings of that, and then moved on to the table of ancients, which there's only 10 in the world at any given time. So I was part of the spiritual organizations that opened the doors to a lot of things for me, where I had to risk my spiritual beliefs on life and death. So I had to really believe in what I was doing or trying to attempt to do. Um, and but it does, none of that compares to what I've learned from these people. It's just amazing. When you start to create that love, it just expands. We are creating the moment, because we're only here for a blink of the eye, right? But we perceive it as somewhat different, and we're not really here. It's a projection. We never leave consciousness. We're always in consciousness, but it's just essence added to a piece of consciousness that's projected here to create this life, which we've already pre-created. But that doesn't mean that it can't evolve and to find the answers. The answers is love.
Do you ever find yourself having to take a break from all this? Because if you think about all these layers of consciousness and being projected here, it could, drive you crazy.
Constantly. I mean, just lately, it's been, my evolution is just like went so fast with the things that they're showing me and that I'm able to understand now, right? Because I couldn't have understood this, in 2022. The stuff that they're revealing to me isn't necessarily, telling me in a book or read this or read that, because that doesn't exist. What it is the actual experience of it, being able to have no brain, right? And being fully mindful, which isn't thinking. It's just accepting and absorbing an experience. And there's always an experience happening no matter what. We don't see it because we're looking for it. We just have to allow that to happen. So yeah, it's it's endless. Our abilities and what's out there. We just can't create it, right? We can't use our program to identify what it is that we're witnessing. And then once we witness something we don't understand, just accept it. It'll come. We don't have to be in a hurry.
You're going to be at the Rebels of Disclosure event in May, right?
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
you going to be talking about there?
I'm just going to show up and let people ask me questions, maybe introduce them kind of like we did here. And but there's going to be a whole bunch of people there. That's just absolutely awesome that have consciousness and such. It won't be like any other conference you may attend on this subjects, but I think it's going to be really fun.
Z, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Oh, that's easy. Love. See how I did that?
Yep. It was
I
a
didn't
one-word
infuse it.
answer. That's all.
Yeah,
Well, Z,
because it's what you create, right?
Z, thank you for your message. Thank you for being my guest, and I hope our paths cross again.
Absolutely. It's fun.
All right, cool.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level